Betrayal leaves a mark. It's a deep kind of hurt, that feeling of disloyalty from someone you trusted. It's an old pain. The Stoics, the philosophers from Rome, they talked about this. They talked about it clearly, and that was 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius, he was an emperor. He wrote that what upsets us isn't what happens. It's how we see it. That's the lens. That's what we can use now for this kind of hurt. So this is a path from that raw feeling, that reaction, to something more reasoned. Something resilient. There are tools here, Stoic principles. You'll see what you can actually control. You'll see how hurt can become a testament, something that shows your character. We'll look at how to pause before you react. We'll look at loving your fate, what that really crazy, and we'll look at justice, what it actually asks of you after someone wrongs you. How would things be different if you met betrayal not by falling apart, but with a kind of composure, a deep, steady composure? The first thing a Stoic does when they're betrayed is this sort of audit. A mental sorting. It's the foundation. Epictetus started his whole handbook with it. He said some things are up to us and some things are not. What's up to us? Our judgments, our impulses, our desires, our actions, everything else what other people do, our reputation, our property, even our own body in some ways, that's not fully up to us. Those are externals, and betrayal is the ultimate external event. It's another person's action, a choice they made in their own mind. That specific choice, that moment of disloyalty, you couldn't control it. You never could. What you can control completely is what happens next in your own mind, your assessment of it, your judgment of what it means, and your own conduct, your response. So to make it practical, say you find out a close friend told a secret you trusted them with. The feelings come: hurt, anger, confusion. The Stoic audit says to pause right there and categorize. What can you control? You can't control that they spoke. You can't control the words that are out there now. You can't control their character, their choices. That's the external event. It's already happened. What can you control? You control your interpretation. Is this a catastrophe, or is it just painful information about someone's trustworthiness? You control your next action. Do you retaliate, or do you choose a conversation, or maybe just distance? You control your own values. Will their disloyalty make you spiteful, or will you act with integrity anyway? This sorting doesn't take the pain away, but it creates a space around it. It cordons off the part that belongs to someone else, and it hands you back the part that's truly yours, your response. So think of a past betrayal, big or small. List the elements in your mind. What was actually within your power in that moment? Was it their decision, or was it only your reaction? This audit isn't about blame. It's about ownership, reclaiming the only territory where you can ever build real peace, your own mind and actions. When you stop pouring energy into trying to control what was never yours to control, something shifts. You stop being a victim of the event. You start becoming the author of your recovery. There's a space between when something happens, like a betrayal, and how we react. That gap, however small, the Stoics built their strongest defense right there. It's the practice of suspending judgment, just pausing before the emotion really takes over. They called it examining your impressions. Any event, betrayal included, hits you first as a raw impression, a flash, a feeling, an initial take. The Stoics had a word for that: fantasia. It's that immediate thought, they did this to me, and then the hurt, the anger right behind it. The key insight is this: that first impression isn't a verdict. It's just data. It's a report from your senses, and like any report, it could be wrong. It could be biased. Your real power, what Epictetus called your prohersis, your faculty of choice, is in what you do next. You can accept that impression as the full truth. Let it decide your emotions, your actions, or you can pause and examine it. Marcus Aurelius wrote it clearly. He said, remove the judgment and you remove the thought, I am hurt. Remove that thought and the hurt itself is gone. He's not saying the event didn't happen. He's saying the lasting injury, the one that festers, is the judgment you attach to it, the story you tell yourself. This person is evil. I am a victim. Everything is broken now. When you suspend that immediate, passionate judgment, you stop the initial injury from multiplying. You keep a rigid story of victimhood from hardening around you. Before you've even taken a breath, think of it now. Your phone buzzes, a message, you read it. It's from someone you trusted. The words are dismissive. Or they reveal a confidence was broken. That first impression hits, a hot wave. The fantasia screams, how could they? This is terrible. Your finger hovers over the keyboard, ready to fire back a reply. This is the moment. Judgment suspension is the conscious act of lowering your hand, putting the phone down, walking away. Saying to yourself, I have received an impression of betrayal. Let me examine it before I agree. In that pause, you might ask, is there another way to see this? What part of this is actually in my control right now? What would a reasoned response look like instead of a reflexive one? That space you create is freedom. It's the difference between being swept away by the storm and finding shelter within it. So for practice, identify one trigger in your life. It doesn't have to be a grand betrayal. It could be a recurring frustration, a pattern of criticism you get, anything that reliably sparks a heated judgment inside. The task isn't to eliminate the trigger. It's to insert a deliberate pause between it and your reaction. Just one breath, one moment of asking, what is the raw impression here and what is my chosen judgment? In that small gap, you exercise your proherses. You reclaim the authorship of your inner world from the automatic stories that try to write it for you. Betrayal for a Stoic isn't poison. It's more like a bitter fertilizer. It's the raw material, the difficult stuff that resilience gets built from, and that brings us to a principle. The Stoics lived by it, and later Nietzsche championed it. It's called Amor Fati, the love of your fate, which doesn't mean you enjoy the pain. It's not masochism. It's a radical acceptance, accepting reality exactly as it unfolded, because this reality is the only place you can practice virtue. The betrayal happened. To rage against that fact, to spend your energy on, if only, or this shouldn't have happened, that's suffering twice, first from the event, then from your refusal to accept the event occurred. Amor Fati asks you to stop that second suffering, the self-inflicted one. It asks you to look at the broken trust, the hurt, and say, this is part of my story now. And in this new chapter, I will find my strength. Marcus Aurelius put it practically. He wrote that an obstacle to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. A betrayal is a formidable obstacle to trust, to peace, but it also becomes the only way forward you have. It's the necessary ground you now have to walk on. Your character can't be tested in a vacuum. It needs friction, it needs difficulty. The betrayal is that friction. It's the test life provided, unbidden, to see what you're made of. Will you become cynical, or will you learn discernment? Will you become vengeful, or will you learn the true shape of justice? Will you collapse, or will you discover a fortitude you never knew you had? The event itself is neutral. Its meaning comes from your response. That's where you practice Amor Fati, not by liking what happened, by actively engaging with the new reality it created. Take a practical example, a business partnership of many years. You built something together, shared risks and visions. Then you discover your partner has been diverting funds, making secret deals for their own benefit. The betrayal is financial, professional, deeply personal. The immediate impulse is to fight, to reclaim, to make them pay. But Amor Fati invites a different perspective after the initial shock. This painful revelation forced a truth into the light. The partnership wasn't what you believed. You were avoiding difficult conversations, ignoring small signs of misalignment. The betrayal, as terrible as it is, gave you a brutal clarity. It removed you from a situation that was, in truth, already unhealthy. Now you're forced to rebuild alone. That rebuilding, though daunting, is where your real growth lies. It demands skills you delegated, courage you hadn't summoned. The betrayal became the bitter fertilizer for a more authentic, self-reliant professional life. It served your long-term development by destroying an illusion you were clinging to. So here's a question to sit with. How might this painful experience be serving your long-term development, even if invisibly right now? Is it teaching you about boundaries you failed to set? Is it showing you the difference between trust and naivete? Is it forcing you to develop inner resources you've neglected because you were leaning on someone else? Amor Fati is the shift from seeing life as something that happens to you to seeing it as something that happens for you, not in a sentimental way, in a deeply utilitarian, philosophical way. Every event, especially the harsh ones, is material for the sculpture of your character. The Stoic doesn't curse the hardness of the marble. They pick up their tools and begin to work. That sculpture of character, it needs a wider view. Those tools, acceptance and inner audit, that's the close work. Now you step back, far back. Imagine you could rise above this moment, above the sting of the words, the tightness in your chest. You go up to a high summit and you look back at this scene from 10 years away. How does it look from there? That's the Stoic practice of cognitive distancing. Sometimes called the view from above. It's a deliberate shift from being immersed to being an observer. You're not erasing the event, you're changing your vantage point to see its true size against your whole life and against the sweep of time itself. Marcus Aurelius was a master of this. He wrote reminders to himself, gazing at the stars, considering how brief a human life is. He said, "Think of the universal substance, of which you have a very small portion, and of universal time, of which a short interval is assigned to you, and of destiny, and how small a part of it you are." He wasn't diminishing human experience, he was contextualizing it. Your betrayal, your conflict is real, but from this elevated view, it's also a single thread in a vast tapestry. A brief event in a long story, this perspective shrinks catastrophizing. That feeling that this is the end of everything, that nothing will ever be right again, it loses power from the summit. You realize life with all its twists continues. You have endured before, you will integrate this too. It becomes a chapter, not the entire book. So how do you apply this when the hurt is fresh? Take a modern pain, social media drama. A friend posts something vague that feels directed at you. Others like it. A private message chain explodes with accusations. The immediate impulse is to fire back, to defend, to get the last word. The emotional charge is high because the screen makes it feel like the whole world is watching. Now apply the view from above, mentally zoom out, picture yourself a year from now. Will this specific post, this exact comment thread matter? Will you even remember the precise wording? Or will you only recall the feeling of friction and what you learned about that relationship? Zoom out further. In the grand narrative of your life, is this digital exchange a defining moment or a passing cloud in your emotional weather? The event doesn't vanish, but its power to dictate your entire state of mind diminishes. It's seen in proportion. The same applies to a deeper family rift. A harsh word during a holiday, an old grievance reopened, a silence that stretches for months. It feels monolithic, a permanent wall. From the summit, you might see it differently. You see the decades of history before this conflict. You see the limited years any of us have. You see how many family disputes, which felt eternal in the moment, eventually softened with time, or were let go out of exhaustion, or were bridged by a shared loss. This doesn't mean you excuse poor behavior. It means you stop letting the conflict consume all the mental space. You give it its actual size, not the inflated size your pain assigns to it. Here's a practical exercise, a reflective prompt. Take your current struggle, this feeling of betrayal. Now, write one paragraph about it, but write it as if you are a wise, detached observer from the future. A kind, calm version of yourself 10 years from now, looking back with compassion. What would that observer say about this event? What would they note about your reaction? What gentle advice would they offer about what truly matters and what can be released? This isn't about dismissing your pain. It's about giving it a container. A context. From the summit, the path forward often looks clearer because you're no longer lost in the thicket of the immediate hurt. You can see the terrain of your life, and you remember you have walked through difficult terrain before. The goal isn't to feel nothing. It's to make sure your actions are right, no matter what you're feeling. That's the pivot. After you've done the audit, taken the pause, accepted things, and looked at the wider view, you get to the most practical question. What do I do now? The answer is in one of the Stoic virtues, justice, not the courtroom kind, a broader principle. Stoic justice is about fairness, about duty. It's giving each person what they're due as a human being, and that includes the person who betrayed you. It's a challenging thought, justice for them after what they did. But here's the shift. Stoic justice is about your character, not about rewarding or punishing theirs. It asks what your integrity demands in this situation. How do you act as your best self when someone else acted from their worst? Your duty is to not join them in the error. Epictetus put it sharply. He said when someone acts unjustly, remember they do it from a mistaken belief about what's good for them. They are harming themselves first by corrupting their own character. Your task, he taught, is not to be angry with them or resent them. It's to pity them for that self-inflicted wound. And then, to make sure you don't compound the injury by acting unjustly yourself. That's where justice becomes your guide for action, not a license for reaction. So what does a just response look like compared to a vengeful reaction? A reaction is driven by the raw emotion. It's the scathing text sent at 2 in the morning. It's the public shaming, the gossip campaign to turn others against them. It's cutting them off with a slammed door and no explanation. It feels powerful in the moment, but it's a surrender. You've let their poor conduct dictate yours. A just response is chosen. It considers what's fair and dignified. Sometimes justice looks like a calm, direct conversation. Not to rehash the pain, but to seek understanding, to express the impact of their actions, to see if a path forward, even if it's a parting of ways, can be walked with clarity. Other times, justice looks like a quiet, dignified exit. You recognize their character isn't aligned with your values, and the fairest thing you can do for yourself is to remove your presence and your trust from their sphere. You set a boundary, not as a punishment for them, but as protection for your own peace. That act of setting a boundary is a profound application of justice toward yourself. You're giving yourself the fairness of safety. You're fulfilling your duty to your own well-being. Think of a workplace scenario. A colleague takes credit for your idea in a major meeting. The reaction is to corner them afterwards, to yell, to immediately run to a supervisor with accusations fueled by fury. The just response might be different. It involves gathering your evidence, your notes, your emails, then requesting a private meeting with that colleague. You state the facts plainly. You said this was your work in the meeting. Here is the documentation that it originated with me. I need to understand why this happened. This approach serves justice. It gives the other person a chance to account for themselves. It establishes a record of your professionalism. It allows for the possibility of correction or apology. But even if they double down on the lie, your just action is complete. You've acted with integrity. You can then take the matter to a supervisor, not from a place of emotional vengeance, but from a place of seeking a fair resolution. Your character remains intact, so here's a question to sit with. In your situation, what would a just resolution look like? Not a fantasy where they beg for forgiveness, but a real-world action you could take that you'd be proud of in 5 years, no matter how the other person responds. Would it be a letter you write to clarify your stance, then release? Would it be a decision to wish them well internally, but to consciously invest your trust elsewhere, defining that just outcome for yourself is the final act of reclaiming your agency? It moves you from the role of the wounded into the role of the architect, building what comes next on a foundation of principle, not pain. Stoicism wants us to do something hard. To look at the person who betrayed us with a kind of calm curiosity. It's not about excusing what they did. It's a way to protect yourself. You look at the intention. You ask why they caused the hurt, to take the poison out of it, to stop making it so personal. The Stoics had this radical idea that nobody chooses what they think is evil. People always act from what they believe is good or right or necessary for them in that moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. He'd remind himself. When someone acts in a hurtful way, it's because they think it's the correct thing to do. They're following their own nature, their own understanding. This is a lens. It's not absolution. It changes the story. It stops being, "they did this to me." It becomes, "they did this from their own confusion." Or their own fear, or their weakness. That shift changes everything. Think about a colleague, someone who undermines you, makes little comments in meetings, holds back information. The immediate story is they hate you, they're out to get you. That story feeds resentment. It wants a feud, but if you use that Stoic curiosity, you ask what need wasn't being met, what fear was driving it. Maybe they feel insecure. Maybe they see you as a threat to their position. Their disloyalty could be a clumsy attempt at self-preservation. It might come from envy or a personal hardship they're carrying, something warping their judgment. None of this makes what they did okay, but it makes it comprehensible. It turns a malicious attack into a human error, and it's easier to navigate a landscape of human error than a landscape of targeted malice. You stop fighting a phantom villain. You start dealing with a flawed person, which is something we all know. This examination is quiet. It's internal. It's not necessarily a conversation with them. It's a story you rewrite for yourself. You depersonalize the injury. You realize their action probably wasn't about you at all. It was about their inner world. Their anxieties, their limitations, their unexamined beliefs. You were just the nearest object, the place where those internal conflicts landed. This is why the Stoics talked about pity, not rage, to see someone so enslaved by their own poor judgment that they would sacrifice their integrity, betray a trust, just to satisfy a temporary fear. That's a sorry state. Your anger at them just chains you to their chaos. Your understanding can set you free from taking it personally. So here's a question to sit with. Without anger, without needing to justify them, just ask, what unmet need might have been driving the person who hurt me? Was it a hunger for control in a life that felt out of control? Was it a deep fear of abandonment that made them act in a way that guaranteed it? Or was it just a moment of weakness, a failure of character they probably regret themselves? You don't need a final answer. The power is in the asking, in that calm curiosity. You reclaim your mental space. You stop revolving around the question of why me. You start seeing the simpler, sadder truth. It was never about you. It was always about them. And in that clarity, the path forward loses its bitterness. It becomes just a matter of steps. Betrayal shows us where we've put our desires in the wrong place. It's a signal, a light pointing to something being off. Which brings us to the Stoic discipline of desire. It's not about wanting less. It's about wanting what's right, wanting what's actually yours to have. The Stoics saw our desires, especially for things we can't control, as the main source of suffering. And in relationships, few desires are as strong or as dangerous as the desire for someone else's constant loyalty. That desire feels natural, but is it really ours to command? Epictetus was clear on this. He said our happiness depends on using our impressions correctly, on lining up our desires with what's in our power. To want something external, another person's fidelity, their approval, their presence, is to hand over the keys to your own peace. You make your serenity depend on someone else's choices. That's a fragile way to live. It sets you up for devastation when, inevitably, human nature shows its flaws. So when betrayal happens, the discipline of desire asks for two looks. First, look at your own misplaced desire. What external guarantee were you holding onto in that relationship? Was it the guarantee they'd never leave, never disappoint, never choose themselves over you? That guarantee was never real. It was a story you told yourself, a desire for a control you never had. The pain of betrayal is partly the pain of that story breaking. The Stoic work is to move that desire inward. Instead of desiring their loyalty, you desire your own ability to handle disloyalty with grace. Instead of craving their approval, you crave your own integrity, no matter what they think. You trade a desire for an external condition for a desire for an internal virtue. That's how you build an unshakable core. Your well-being stops resting on the shifting sand of other people's actions and rests on the solid ground of your own character. Then the other side, the person who betrayed you, also failed in their discipline of desire. Their disloyalty was, at its root, a choice to desire something incorrectly. Maybe they desired short-term gratification over long-term integrity. They desired escape from a hard conversation over the honesty needed to keep trust. They desired to avoid their own shame, even at the cost of your connection. Their action was a failure of their own moral reasoning, a surrender to a lower desire. Seeing it that way, as misplaced desire, drains the event of more of its personal poison. It wasn't a grand statement about your worth. It was a sign of their own confusion about what's truly good. To make it practical, think of a friendship where you deeply wanted unconditional support. You wanted them to always take your side, always be available, always affirm your choices. That's a heavy external demand to put on another person. When they eventually fail to meet it because they have their own life, their own struggles, it feels like a betrayal. The discipline of desire asks you to recalibrate. Can you shift from wanting their unconditional support to wanting your own resilience? Can you want, most of all, to be the kind of person who can hear a different opinion without crumbling, who can navigate loneliness without panic, who can self-validate instead of always looking for external proof? This shift turns the relationship from a source of need into a space of chosen connection. It becomes a gift, not a requirement for your stability. So here's a quiet question. What external guarantee was I desiring in this relationship that isn't ultimately mine to command? Was it the guarantee of perfect understanding, of always being prioritized, of never being alone? Name that desired guarantee. Then consider what internal quality you could build to meet that same need from within yourself. That's the real work. That's where the discipline of desire turns betrayal from a wound into a workshop, a place where you forge a self-reliance so deep that no external event can ever truly break you again. Stoic forgiveness isn't saying what happened was okay. It's saying your peace is non-negotiable. That's the distinction. It's not an emotion you feel toward someone else. It's an action you take for yourself, a choice to stop investing your present energy in a past event you can't change. It's the final withdrawal of emotional capital from a bankrupt account. When you hold onto resentment, you're keeping that past betrayal alive in your mind. You replay it, you feed it with your attention. The Stoics saw that as self-harm. You drink the poison and expect the other person to get sick. Seneca wrote about anger, which fuels resentment. He said holding onto anger is like grasping a hot coal to throw at someone else. You're the one who gets burned first. You get burned most deeply. The other person may have moved on. They may not even know they occupy your thoughts. But you're still there in that moment of hurt, clutching that coal. Forgiveness is opening your hand and letting it drop. It's releasing the internal burden. Not because the coal wasn't hot. not because the burn didn't happen, but because holding it only prolongs your own suffering. That shifts the whole framework. It moves forgiveness from a moral obligation, something you should do for them, to a practical act of self-preservation, something you get to do for you. The mental shift is from the story of "they owe me" to the declaration, "I choose to cancel the debt for my own freedom." That debt, an apology, remorse, restitution, it may never be paid. By waiting for it, you make your inner freedom contingent on their actions. You hand them the remote control to your emotional state. Stoic forgiveness is deciding to stop waiting. To write off that emotional debt as uncollectible, and to reclaim the mental real estate it was occupying. Think of a family member who made a cutting remark years ago during a vulnerable time. Every holiday, every gathering, you brace yourself. You rehearse old arguments in your head. The space between you is charged with that unsaid history. The grudge is a story you keep telling yourself. It's the lens for every interaction. The forgiveness process begins when you decide to stop telling yourself that particular story. You don't have to pretend the remark was fine. You just choose to stop letting it dictate the present atmosphere. You greet them with neutrality, not the old script of hurt. You free up the mental bandwidth that was dedicated to monitoring their behavior, anticipating slights. That bandwidth is now available for your own creativity, for your present relationships, for your peace. So consider this a process, not a single grand gesture. It starts with a quiet internal decision. You might say, "I am no longer going to rent space in my mind to this resentment." Each time the old hurt surfaces, you acknowledge it. Then you gently redirect your focus to something within your control, your next breath, a task at hand, a value you want to embody. You're not repressing the memory, you're changing your relationship to it. You're moving it from the center of your attention to the periphery. It becomes a historical fact, not a living antagonist. What mental space in your life is currently occupied by a resentment, large or small? What could flourish in that space if it were cleared? Maybe space for a new project, for deeper sleep, for more genuine laughter, for simply being present without the background static of an old grievance. That's the liberation on offer. It's the quiet, powerful act of choosing your own peace over the perpetual rehearsal of a pain you did not choose, but which you now have the power to release. Loyalty might not be a promise you get from someone. It might just be a trait they have or don't have, and you notice it. That's a different way to see it. The Stoics tell you to stop expecting it and start observing it instead. We usually go into things thinking there's a contract, that if we're loyal, we're owed loyalty back. It's like a debt, and that's what sets you up to feel betrayed, because you've turned their character into something they owe you. The Stoic view is different. They'd say loyalty is a preferred indifferent. You want it, you hope for it, but you can't demand it as a guarantee. The minute you demand it as a right, you're setting yourself up for a specific kind of pain, the pain of an entitlement that goes unmet. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. He said to accept people as they are, not as you wish they were. See them clearly, don't demand that they be different. That's the observation mindset. You're not waiting for a promise to be kept, you're watching calmly to see if their character shows this trait. Loyalty becomes data, not a pledge. When you see it happen, you can appreciate it, you can feel grateful for it. When you don't see it, you're not dealing with a broken contract. You're just getting clear information about their nature. The disappointment is still there. But it's the disappointment of discovering a fact, not the devastation of a personal violation. It becomes about them, not about a promise they broke to you. Take a work situation. You have a colleague. You think of them as a friend. You've covered for them, supported their projects. You operate on this assumption of mutual loyalty. Then a leadership role opens up. You both want it, and you find out later your colleague told a manager you struggle with strategic thinking while talking up their own strengths. The old way of seeing it screams betrayal. They broke the contract. The observation frame gives you a different lens. It asks you to look back without the filter of your expectation. What had their character already shown you? Had they ever taken credit for shared work before? In small ways, had they shown a pattern of putting their own advancement first? The observation mindset says their action wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was a consistent expression of a trait you might have overlooked because you were hoping for a different one. Their loyalty in that context just wasn't a trait they possessed. That doesn't take the hurt away, but it changes the injury from a shocking ambush to a painful lesson in paying closer attention. It moves you from asking "why did they do this to me?" to asking "what did I miss about who they actually are?" So here's a question for clarity. Based on actions, not words, what had this person's character already shown you about their capacity for loyalty? Look at the small patterns, not the grand declarations. Did they keep small confidences? Did they show up when it was inconvenient? Did they defend your reputation when you weren't there? Or only agree with you when you were? The answers aren't about blaming yourself for trusting. They're about refining your perception. This reframe is a gift of agency, really. It gives power back to you. Instead of being a passive recipient of someone's virtue or failing, you become an active observer. You can choose to invest your trust where the evidence supports it. You can adjust your expectations based on reality, not hope. Loyalty you observe is a sturdy foundation. Loyalty you just expect is a castle built on sand. The Stoics had this exercise. They'd mentally rehearse the very disloyalty they feared. They called it premeditatio malorum. It's not pessimism. It's not anxious obsession. It's a training exercise done with calm intention. The goal is to detach your well-being from fragile things like someone's unwavering loyalty. You face the possibility of its loss head-on. By visiting that future in your imagination, you drain the event of its power to shock you. You inoculate your peace against the sting of betrayal. Seneca wrote about this. He said the person who anticipates trouble takes away its power when it arrives. He suggested we picture not just loss, but the specific ways it might happen. Not to live in dread, but to live in readiness. This mental preparation softens fortune's blows because you've already walked the emotional path in advance. When you do this, you're not practicing suspicion. You're practicing your own response. You're reinforcing your inner citadel so no external event can breach it. The focus is on your virtue, your composure, your ability to remain yourself regardless of what another person does. Think of it like a fire drill. No one does a drill because they believe the building is about to burn. They do it so if the alarm sounds, the response is calm, practiced, effective. The drill removes panic. Negative visualization is a fire drill for your emotional resilience. You calmly imagine a scenario. Perhaps you picture a trusted friend sharing a private confidence. You see the moment of discovery. You feel the initial pang of hurt. And then, in your mind's eye, you watch yourself. You watch yourself take a breath. You watch yourself apply the audit, separating what is yours from what is theirs. You watch yourself choose a response rooted in justice and dignity, not reactive fury. You rehearse your equanimity. By doing this, you accomplish two things. First, you cultivate a deeper gratitude for the loyalty you currently enjoy. You stop taking it for granted as permanent. You see it, in this moment, as a gift. And second, you build a neural pathway for composure. You make that calm, principled response more familiar, more accessible for the day you might need it. The practice transforms the unknown from a source of anxiety into a terrain you've already mapped. So here's a small place to start. This week, set aside a few quiet minutes. Choose one relationship where trust is important. Now, gently and without agitation, mentally rehearse a minor breach. Not a catastrophe, but a small letdown. Imagine they forget an important promise, or they speak carelessly about a sensitive topic. Observe the initial feeling that arises in you, then guide your rehearsal to the next step. How would your best self handle this? What would a just and temperate response look like? Perhaps it's a calm conversation to seek understanding. Perhaps it's a private decision to adjust your expectations. The power isn't in the imagined disloyalty. It's in the repeated rehearsal of your own unwavering character in the face of it. This is how you build an inner stability no external event can shake. A Stoic doesn't just withdraw. Humans are social. That energy for connection, it doesn't go away. To cut yourself off completely, that's not strength. That's letting one person's actions decide your relationship with everyone. The response is to heal inside a community, not outside of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. He said, "We're made for cooperation, like hands, like feet." To go against the common good is to go against your own nature, and a betrayal doesn't erase that duty to the common good. It just asks you to point it somewhere new. To find different ground for that cooperation to happen. This isn't about finding a quick replacement. It's a conscious choice to build new alliances on something firmer. You put your social energy into relationships built on shared values, not just circumstance. The difference is in how you look. Cynicism says no one can be trusted, so it builds a wall. Wisdom says trust is earned, so it builds a gate you watch. You're not looking for perfection, you're looking for alignment. You look for the virtues that were missing before. Integrity in small things, reliability when it's hard, kindness without a reward. You look for those signs. That's how you keep the past from poisoning the future. In practice, this redirection often means finding a structured community, a shared purpose. Instead of waiting for connection, you go where it can grow. A volunteer group, you see character there who shows up when it's difficult. A study group, a class. The shared pursuit of learning creates a bond, a team sport, a community garden. Where cooperation is part of the activity itself, in those spaces you're not auditioning friends, you're working on something together. The relationships that form come from shared effort. They have a different texture, a sturdiness, and this process works as a mirror. As you seek these connections, you cultivate those virtues in yourself. Joining a garden teaches patience, volunteering exercises compassion. You become the kind of person you're hoping to find. You close the circle. The betrayal showed a lack. Your response is to create an abundance in yourself and in your social world. So here's a question. What qualities will you look for now more consciously? Not a checklist, but a compass for your attention. Is it listening without immediately fixing? Is it speaking a hard truth with kindness? Is it consistency over time? Name those qualities, then ask, where do people practice those things? The answer points you toward your next community. It turns the energy of loss into the structure for a wiser, more connected life. Betrayal has a fire in it, and if you control the bellows, you can forge something new. That's the alchemy. The Stoics saw a choice. When hardship hits, you can let it burn inside you. You can just think about it over and over, or you can take that raw energy and channel it outward into something constructive. Action is the answer to that passive suffering. It's using your time and energy to build, to create, to contribute, not to replay the injury. That's Amor Fati in practice. You take the difficult material life gave you, and you shape it into something of value. The obstacle becomes the way, but only if you start moving. The Stoics believed our purpose was to live in accordance with nature. For a rational being, that means to act virtuously. And what's more virtuous than turning a personal wound into a universal gift, to make your pain into a project that serves others? That teaches or inspires. That's fulfilling the purpose. You stop being just a person who was hurt. You become a person who used that hurt to make the world slightly better, or more beautiful, or more understandable. That's how you reclaim your story, not by denying the pain, by making it mean something beyond itself. History is full of this. Seneca, the Roman philosopher, he was exiled to Corsica for 8 years, a brutal political betrayal, cut off from his life in Rome. He could have spent those years in bitter despair. Instead, he poured himself into writing, his letters, his essays on Stoicism. We still read them. They were forged in that crucible of exile. His personal hardship became the raw material for timeless wisdom. Wisdom that has comforted millions. He took the fire of his own injustice and used it to light a lamp for others, or think of something more modern. Someone after a painful divorce or the loss of a deep friendship, they take that emotional energy and they channel it into founding a support group. They use their lonely experience of betrayal as a blueprint so others feel less alone. The pain isn't erased, it's given a job. It's put to work for a cause greater than yourself. The project doesn't need to be grand, it can be personal. The key is the redirection of energy. It could be learning a physical skill, woodworking, gardening, where you shape and nurture new growth with your hands. It could be writing, not for publication, but to process your own story. It could be a fitness goal, turning emotional heaviness into physical strength. The form isn't as important as the function. The function is to create a channel so that turbulent energy can flow through, so it doesn't stagnate and poison your inner landscape. So here's a question, a quiet one. What's one project you can pour your energy into right now? It doesn't have to be born from this pain, but it can be fueled by it. Identify the first step, the smallest one, clearing a space on a desk, opening a blank document, buying a notebook, planting a single seed. That first step is a declaration. It says the energy of this experience won't define me by destruction. It will define me by what I choose to build. Every relationship has an invisible expiration date. That's the Stoic view, not of love but of its form. It's not despair, it's just reality. And holding that truth, letting it settle in, changes how you stand inside your connections. It's not about doom, it's about a clear-eyed gratitude for what's here right now. This is the antidote to clinging. It's recognizing that all things change by their nature. Betrayal is just one of the more abrupt ways that change arrives. Understanding that doesn't excuse the hurt. What it does is strip away the layer of shock. That shock compounds the pain. It creates that feeling of unique victimhood, the sense that this ending is some monstrous exception. The Stoic sees it as part of the spectrum. Relationships end through betrayal, through distance, through the quiet drift of different paths, or through a life's conclusion. All of it is just a manifestation of the same law. Impermanence. Marcus Aurelius kept returning to this in his private writings. He'd remind himself to think of the whole of substance and the whole of time. How small a part is assigned to each person. He wrote about the brief, fleeting existence of everyone and their fame after death. He urged himself to see everything as already disintegrating in change, coming into being through alteration. For him, this wasn't morbid. It was a tool for focus. It sharpened his appreciation for the people beside him right then. When you internalize that the conversation you're having, the trust you're sharing, exists in a finite window, you stop taking it for granted. You listen more closely. You appreciate the simple fact of their presence, and when the window closes, and all windows do, the grief may stay, but the foundation's shattering surprise is gone. You're not a victim of a broken rule, you're a participant in a natural process. Take a friendship that simply fades. You and a friend move to different cities. Weekly calls become monthly, then yearly. Your shared context evaporates. There's no dramatic fight, no betrayal, just the slow, silent turning of life's pages. An old, clinging mindset might breed a quiet resentment, a sadness over a lost connection. The Stoic realism lens lets you see it differently. You can appreciate the chapter you shared for what it was. A beautiful, temporary alignment. You can honor its end not as a failure, but as the completion of its natural arc. Your energy is freed from trying to resuscitate a ghost. And it can go toward the connections that are alive in your current landscape. The same applies to a professional alliance. you work intensely with a colleague for years on a project. It concludes, your daily collaboration ends. You may stay in touch, but the core reason for the bond has fulfilled its purpose. Seeing that transition as part of the flow, rather than a loss, lets you part with respect and goodwill. It leaves the door open for future alignments under different circumstances. So here's a quiet space for reflection. Bring to mind a relationship that ended not through betrayal, but through the natural course of life. A childhood friend, a mentor, a neighbor you once saw daily. Can you apply this lens of Stoic realism to it? Can you see its temporality not as a tragedy, but as its inherent condition? Does viewing it as a completed chapter rather than an interrupted one bring a different quality of peace? This practice trains the mind gently. It prepares you to meet all endings, even the painful and unjust ones, with a resilience rooted not in hope for permanence, but in a deep acceptance of life's fundamental rhythm. Before we judge someone else, we have to look at ourselves. And that's the hardest part. It's the principle of self-examination. You turn the lens back on your own role in what happened, not for blame. That's not the point. It's for growth, for finding a deeper kind of agency. You couldn't control their choice to betray you, but you can look at the soil where that choice grew. Your own expectations, your own way of communicating, your own conduct. This isn't about finding fault with yourself. It's about finding power, the power to understand so you can act differently next time. Epictetus focused on this. He said the philosopher's job isn't to change the world, but to work on their own faculty of choice, to examine their own judgments, their own desires. He taught that when we're frustrated by something outside us, we should look first to our own opinions. That's the mirror. So what does that honest look mean? It means asking questions that take courage. Were my expectations of this person reasonable, or were they just projections of what I needed? Did I communicate my boundaries clearly, or did I assume they could read my mind? Was I virtuous in my own conduct, or did I add to a dynamic of resentment? That line of questioning is liberating. It moves you from being the one who was wronged to being a student of human nature. Starting with your own, you stop asking only why they did this and start asking what I can learn from how it unfolded. Think of a common situation. Someone feels let down by a friend who always cancels plans. The story becomes, they don't value me, they're unreliable. But self-examination without blame might show something else. Maybe you saw the pattern early but never said you were disappointed because you feared conflict. Maybe you kept making plans hoping for a different outcome, instead of adjusting your expectations or stating your need for reliability. Your own conduct avoiding that hard conversation shaped the dynamic. It let the pattern continue until it felt like a big betrayal, when it was really a series of small fractures that were never addressed. Seeing this isn't to excuse their flakiness. It's to recognize your own power to change the script earlier. It's the difference between being a passenger in a car heading for a crash and realizing you had your own steering wheel all along. So here's a space for that honest inquiry. What's one lesson about yourself, your patterns, or your expectations that this betrayal can teach you? Maybe it's about the importance of saying what your standards for trust are. Maybe it's about recognizing when your desire for connection makes you overlook clear red flags. Maybe it's just about the strength you found in yourself when you had to stand alone. That lesson is the gold you mine from the difficult earth of experience. It's the part of the story you get to keep long after the hurt fades. One road leads to public confrontation. To emotional warfare, the Stoic path often leads to a quiet silence, a powerful silence, and this isn't about being passive. It's about choosing your battleground with immense care. There are moments when speaking serves no purpose, no virtuous purpose, when words just add fuel to a fire that's already burning out of control. In those moments, the most potent action you can take is a deliberate inaction. A dignified inaction, a silence chosen from strength, from self-respect. This is the silence of the deep ocean floor, not the silence of an empty room. It's a presence, not an absence. It's your inner peace manifesting externally. Seneca captured this. He wrote that the best reaction to nonsense is to ignore it completely. He argued that to answer some provocations is to descend to their level. To remain silent is to maintain your position on higher ground. Now, this silence isn't stonewalling. Stonewalling is a tactic. It's withdrawal to punish or control. This is different. This is a conscious disengagement from a dynamic that has no path to resolution. No path to virtue. You're not refusing to communicate out of spite. You're refusing to participate in a spectacle that degrades your own character. Think of how this applies. A former colleague starts spreading a false rumor about you professionally. The gossip reaches your ears. The immediate impulse is to craft a public rebuttal. To message everyone involved, to set the record straight with force, but the Stoic asks a different question. Will my engagement actually correct the falsehood? Or will it simply amplify the drama? Will it reveal my character, or will it obscure it? Obscure it in a cloud of defensiveness. Often, the most powerful response is to continue doing excellent work. To let your consistent actions over time become the truest rebuttal. Your silence becomes the space where their words echo and eventually fade for lack of an opponent. Or consider a personal conflict online, a harsh comment, a misrepresentation of your views. You feel the heat rise, your fingers itching to type a cutting reply. That's the noise of drama. It's a siren call to a battle where no one wins. Choosing dignified silence means closing the tab, taking a walk, investing your energy in a real conversation with someone who matters. Your silence protects your time, it protects your focus, it protects your inner equilibrium. It declares that your peace is not available for public auction. So here's a question to sit with. In your situation, what might a dignified silence look like, and what would it protect within you? Would it protect your time from being consumed by circular arguments? Would it protect your heart from further barbs? Would it protect the clarity of your own mind, protect it from being clouded by someone else's chaos? Defining that protected space is the first step. Your silence then becomes the guardian of it, a fortress of calm, built not to keep the world out, but to preserve what is sacred within. You and the person who betrayed you will both be dust, sooner than you think. That's not a morbid thought. It's a clarifier, the ultimate one. The Stoics had a name for it, Memento Mori. Remember, you must die. They used it as a daily practice, not to dwell on the end, but to illuminate how to live. And when you hold that truth, the sting of betrayal, it changes. It's seen against this vast, silent backdrop, your finite time, petty grievances, the need to be right, the desire for revenge. It starts to look like clutter. Like you're trading precious hours for trinkets of resentment. This lens doesn't excuse the wrong. It just asks a brutal question, a freeing one. Is this how I want to spend the irreplaceable currency of my days? Marcus Aurelius kept this reminder close. He wrote to himself, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. He used the certainty of death to create an urgency. For virtue, for clarity, for letting go of what doesn't serve a meaningful life. The pain is real, but Memento Mori asks you to measure its true cost. Against the limited ledger of your existence, to spend years nursing a bitterness, that's to grant that person a kind of immortality in your mind. They occupy your thoughts long after the event. Long after they've likely moved on. Remembering your mortality is how you evict them. It's how you reclaim that mental real estate for something alive. For something that matters now. Think of a family estrangement, one that's lasted decades, two siblings divided by an old betrayal, over an inheritance maybe. Or a careless word that was never forgiven. They carry this cold silence between them, through birthdays, through milestones, through the gradual aging of their own lives. Seen through the mortality lens, that's a tragedy of wasted time. The shared history, the potential for reconciliation, the simple comfort of a bond, all sacrificed. At the altar of a grudge that will mean nothing at the end, the practice of Memento Mori might inspire one of them to pick up the phone, not to re-litigate the past, but to say, "Time is short, I don't want this between us anymore." It creates the possibility for a closing chapter written in peace, instead of one left blank with hostility. Or it might inspire a quiet, internal release, a decision to stop carrying the weight, so that their remaining interactions, however limited, are free from the old poison. The perspective forces a decision. Address it with final, clear-eyed grace, or let it go with conscious intention, but don't linger, not in the exhausting limbo of unresolved resentment. That limbo is a theft of your present moment. So here's a challenge, a reflective prompt. If you knew for certain you had 1 year left to live, how much of your mental energy would this betrayal deserve? Would you spend your precious weeks rehearsing the old hurt? Or would you spend them building what you still can, loving who you still have, becoming who you still wish to be? The answer tells you everything about what to do next. The mortality lens isn't about fear, it's about love, a fierce love for the life you have right now, which is too precious to waste in the shadow of someone else's failure. The Stoics had this idea called the reserve clause. It's a kind of mental footnote. You add it quietly to any commitment you make. You give your loyalty, your honesty, your full effort. You don't hold back, but in your mind you acknowledge the outcome isn't yours to command. You act as if everything depends on you, while knowing the final result depends on so many things outside your control. There's the classic analogy of the archer. The archer's job is to do everything right, to choose the bow, to notch the arrow carefully, to draw with perfect form, to aim true, to release with a steady hand. The archer controls all of that, that's their virtue, but once the arrow leaves the bow, it's subject to the wind, a sudden gust, an obstacle. The archer can't control where it lands. The Stoic sage is like that. They focus entirely on the quality of their shot, their own intentions and actions, while remaining indifferent to the final outcome. The reserve clause is that whispered, fate permitting, you add after your best effort. I will be a loyal friend, fate permitting the friendship to endure. I will enter this partnership with full integrity, fate permitting my partner does the same. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. It lets you be open to invest deeply without making your entire emotional stability contingent on another person's choices. You build your house on the rock of your own character, not on the shifting sand of their reciprocity. Think of starting a new creative project with a collaborator. You're excited, you share a vision. The reserve clause means you commit completely to your side. You meet deadlines, you communicate openly, you bring your best ideas. You do your part virtuously, and at the same time you hold the outcome lightly, the success of the project, the harmony of the partnership. You understand their follow-through, the market reception, even your own sustained inspiration aren't guaranteed. This mental posture prevents two toxic extremes. First, it prevents that naive overinvestment that leads to devastation if things go wrong. And second, it prevents the fearful underinvestment that sabotages the venture from the start because you're too guarded to truly contribute. You are fully in the game, but you are not defined by the final score. So consider a relationship or endeavor you're invested in, a new friendship, a work goal, a family commitment. Silently formulate your reserve clause for it. Name your virtuous action. I will listen without judgment. I will deliver my work with excellence. I will show up with patience. Then add the clause, while accepting that the response, the result, the longevity is not mine to command. Feel the subtle shift that creates. It isn't a withdrawal of care. It's an infusion of freedom. You're acting from a place of inner integrity, not from a desperate need for a specific outcome. Your peace remains your own, no matter which way the wind blows. You don't have to be grateful for the betrayal, but you can be grateful for the strength it showed you. That's the difference. Stoicism isn't about thanking someone for hurting you. That's not right. It's about looking past the person who caused the pain to the gift that came inside it. The gift isn't the suffering, it's what the suffering made you do. The strength you had to find, the clarity you had to face, the old version of yourself you couldn't be anymore. Marcus Aurelius talked about this. He said the obstacle becomes the way. What stands in the way becomes the path. Your job is to find that path inside the betrayal, to take that raw experience and find the wisdom in it. This is a choice. It's active, it's not a passive feeling of thanks. It's something you decide to do. You sift through the ashes and you pick out the pieces that didn't burn. The pieces that are harder now, clearer, more valuable. Think of a broken bone. You're not grateful for the break. The pain is real. The inconvenience is huge. But during the recovery, you learn patience, a deeper kind. You appreciate simple movement in a new way. You find a toughness for getting through daily discomfort. The break was bad. The qualities you built because of it are good. You can hold both. The Stoic practice is to point your gratitude at those qualities, not the event that started them. So what are the gifts? They're personal, but often it's a new discernment. Before, you might have trusted too easily. You saw the best in people. Now you've learned to watch actions, not words. You've learned trust is built in small, consistent steps, not given all at once. That's a form of wisdom, a protective clarity. Another gift is stronger boundaries. The pain of the violation shows you where your lines are vividly. You learn to state them, to hold them with calm consistency. This isn't about building walls. It's about putting in a gate, a dignified one. You decide who gets the key. Based on their respect, that's a skill that helps every relationship after. And maybe the deepest gift is self-reliance. When the person you leaned on wasn't steady, you had to find your own footing. You had to validate yourself, comfort yourself, believe in your own ability to endure. That inner strength is something no one can take. Here's a way to make it solid. Take a quiet moment, ask yourself this. List 3 specific ways you've become wiser or stronger because of this. Be concrete, not "I'm tougher," but "I now wait and watch a person's consistency for months before I call them a close friend." Not "I trust less," but "I've learned to value actions that show integrity, not just words that promise it." Writing this down does the separation. It pulls the lesson apart from the pain. It lets you look at the lesson, hold it, and feel a real gratitude for having it in your life. That gratitude becomes a quiet power. It changes the story. From one of loss to one of hard-won gain. When a relationship shakes, your daily practices are the ground. The external world can crumble. Trust is gone. Certainty, the future you saw, is gone. In that freefall, the strongest resistance isn't a grand gesture toward the person who hurt you. It's the quiet return to your own routines. Your discipline becomes the container. It holds you together. It's a reaffirmation, moment by moment, of what you can still control: yourself, your actions, your time. The Stoics understood this. Epictetus taught that we must attend to our own mind as a full-time job. We must be faithful to our duties. When a relational storm hits, that duty shifts inward. Your primary duty becomes maintaining your own integrity, your own structure, your own forward motion, sticking to your morning ritual, your work schedule, your evening walk. These aren't trivial distractions. They are declarations. They say, this external event does not get to dismantle me. I am still here. I still show up. Think of rebuilding a house after a quake. The tremor has happened. The landscape is altered. You can't control that, but you can pick up one tool and then another. You can lay one brick of routine each day. Making your bed, preparing a proper meal, showing up to your job with focus. Each of these is a brick. They seem small against the scale of the damage. But together, day after day, they reconstruct a habitable inner world. They prevent that feeling of identity dissolution, where you feel you've lost yourself along with the relationship. Your routine is the architecture of your selfhood. It reminds you who you are, independent of anyone else's presence or approval, a practical example. In the raw aftermath of a separation, the hours stretch into a formless void. The temptation is to stay in bed, to scroll through old messages, to let the day dissolve in grief. The Stoic application of routine intervenes. It says you will get up at your usual time, you will drink a glass of water, you will go for a 20-minute walk, no matter how heavy your legs feel. You will open your work computer and complete one meaningful task. This isn't about suppressing the pain. It's about channeling the energy of that pain into a structure. The walk gives your body a rhythm. The work task engages a different part of your mind. You are not denying the hurt. You are refusing to let it be the only tenant in your mental house. You are making room for other things, for competence, for movement, for the simple dignity of following through on a promise you made to yourself. So here is a question. What is one non-negotiable daily practice you can commit to that is entirely for your own well-being? It must be simple, wholly within your control. It could be 5 minutes of writing before sleep. It could be preparing a healthy lunch. It could be a specific time each evening where you read a book with your phone in another room. The content matters less than the consistency. That small, repeated act of self-fidelity becomes your anchor. It is the quiet, daily proof that you are rebuilding. That you are still the author of your days, even when a chapter ended in a way you never wanted. This discipline is the unshakable core. No betrayal can ever touch it. Stoic resilience isn't about being a stone. It's not about being unfeeling. It's more like a willow tree. You're rooted in virtue, but you're flexible. The winds of circumstance come and you can bend. We often get this wrong. We think strength is hardness. We think the goal is to build a fortress, walls so thick nothing gets in. But a fortress is static. It can be besieged. It can crumble under pressure. The Stoic ideal is different. It's organic. It's alive. It's the strength of a deeply rooted tree. Your principles are the roots, your core values, your understanding of what is truly good. Those roots go deep into the earth of your character, and because of that deep anchoring, the trunk can sway. The branches can bend. A gale force comes a betrayal, and they bend without snapping, feeling that storm, the full emotional force that's not a failure. It's the necessary flexibility. The philosophy doesn't ask for numbness, it asks for a different relationship to the sensations. The Stoic sage felt impressions fully. The Fantasia, they felt the sting, the heat of anger, the cold clutch of grief. Their mastery was in the next step. They didn't quickly assent to the judgments those impressions carried. They didn't add the story that this ruins everything or that person is evil. They let the feeling pass through the flexible branches of their awareness. Their roots held firm. That redefinition makes it more human, more accessible. You're not failing if you feel pain. You're succeeding if you feel it, and don't let it define your entire being. Picture two responses to the same hurt. One person becomes brittle. They harden instantly. Their anger is sharp. Their words are like flint meant to spark a fire. They retreat behind a wall of cold silence. They believe that impenetrability is strength, but that rigidity is fragile. It can shatter from a single, unexpected blow. The other person practices willow-like strength. They feel the impact. They acknowledge the hurt openly to themselves. Their voice might waver. They might need time alone. But their core doesn't fracture. Their commitment to acting with justice, their self-respect, they bend. They might even start a difficult conversation from a place of composed honesty. Not from brittle accusation. That flexibility isn't weakness. It's the resilience of something alive, something that can recover, something that can grow new leaves after the storm passes. So look at an area where you've faced disloyalty or deep disappointment. Where have you been trying to be a stone, building a wall of numbness or unyielding anger? And where could you practice being a willow instead? What would it look like to acknowledge the pain fully? To let it move through you while consciously keeping your roots planted in your own integrity. That shift from fortress to flexibility is where Stoic strength becomes a living practice. Not just a theoretical ideal, it lets you remain in the world, connected, compassionate, without being destroyed by the inevitable hardships. You're the author of your own life. Betrayal, that's a plot twist. It's not the climax, it's not the ending. It's a turn in the story you didn't write, one you wouldn't have chosen. But your power as the author, it isn't about controlling every twist. It's in how your character responds, how they grow, how they move the story forward from there. That's the long view, seeing your life not as one shattered scene, but as a whole book. And you're still holding the pen. The Stoics, they understood this. They focused on the present moment, the only page you're actually writing on right now. The past chapter is done, the ink is dry. You can reread it, you can analyze it, but you can't change a single word. The future chapters, they're unwritten. They're outlines. The only thing that's truly yours, like Epictetus said, is your use of the present moment, your choice of action, your choice of virtue. Right now, that's your authorial control. When you fixate on that plot twist, on the betrayal, you're stuck. You're rereading the same painful chapter over and over. You're letting one event define the whole tone of your story. The narrative perspective asks you to close that chapter, to turn the page, to start drafting the next one with intention. This is more than a metaphor, it's a practical tool. Think of someone who discovers a partner's long-term dishonesty. The immediate aftermath, it feels like the story has ended. The trust, the shared future, the identity of being in that relationship, it all collapses. The narrative view asks different questions. It says that was a devastating chapter. Call it the revelation. It's complete now. What's the title of the next chapter? Is it rebuilding independence? Is it the discovery of self-worth? You get to choose the theme. And more importantly, you get to decide what virtues your character embodies in that chapter. Will it be courage as you build a new life alone? Will it be temperance, managing your anger and grief with dignity? Will it be wisdom, integrating the lesson without letting it make you bitter? You're not just a passive character, you're the author determining the character's development. To make it concrete, try this. Take a notebook, write down a brief title for the chapter that contained the betrayal, acknowledge it, then, on a fresh page, write the title for the next chapter. The one you're starting right now. Underneath, list 3 to 5 actions, attitudes that would demonstrate the virtue you want to embody in this new section. For example, if your next chapter is cultivating inner peace, your actions might be, I will take a silent walk each morning before checking my phone. I will practice pausing before responding to anything that triggers me. I will end each day by noting one thing I handled with calmness. This exercise moves the narrative from your head onto the page. It makes your authorship tangible, so here's a reflective prompt, a quiet space to define your story. If this were a book, what would the title of the next chapter be? And what virtue would your character embody in it? Let the answer be simple, let it be kind. The chapter might be called The Quiet Months and Embody Patience. It might be called New Foundations and Embody Diligence. The title itself is a compass. It points your attention forward to the part of the story you're still actively writing. Every day you write a few more lines in that chapter. Every choice aligned with your chosen virtue adds a sentence of strength, of integrity, of quiet growth. The betrayal becomes a turning point in the hero's journey, not the final defeat, and that shift in perspective, from victim of a past plot to author of a future story, that's where true resilience is written. Stoicism points to a difficult idea. You might never get a good reason because a good reason might not exist. Our minds want logic. We look for patterns. When someone we trust breaks that trust, we immediately look for a story. We try to find the missing piece. We think if we can just understand the why, then we can handle the hurt. We can put it in a category, we can file it away, but that search, even though it's natural, can become a trap. It keeps you stuck in the other person's head, trying to solve a puzzle that might not have a solution. The Stoic approach is to accept a kind of limit, to accept that some things people do come from pure confusion, from a moment of weakness, from a messy knot of feelings and bad choices that doesn't lead to a clean explanation. Asking for a logical reason for an illogical act is like asking for clear water from a muddy well. You'll just wear yourself out and you still won't get what you wanted. Marcus Aurelius looked at the world's chaos. He wrote that you shouldn't be surprised when a fig tree gives you figs. And you shouldn't be surprised by what human nature produces. If a person is foolish or mixed up or controlled by their emotions, why would you expect them to act with wisdom? Expecting a fool not to be foolish is the actual mistake. It sets you up for endless frustration. Seen this way, the betrayal isn't a shocking break in the order of things. It's just the fig from that specific tree, the result of that person's character in that moment. Your peace comes from accepting the tree's nature, not from trying to analyze one confusing piece of fruit. Imagine a friend who turns cold. You go over your last talks looking for something you did wrong. You read every message for a hint. You might create whole stories about a comment you made or a rumor they heard. The mental effort is huge, but the real reason could be very simple and completely hidden. It might be a private worry they're dealing with, a stress you don't know about that's made them pull back from everyone. It might be a flash of envy they're embarrassed by and can't explain. It might be no reason at all, just a cloud of their own unhappiness that drifted over your friendship. Trying to figure it out is like trying to read a book in a language you don't know. You'll only see shapes, and your mind will invent meanings that aren't real. Accepting that you may never fully understand isn't giving up. It's a strategic pullback. You're taking your mental energy back from a pointless task. So here's a quiet practice, a sentence to keep in mind when the question why starts spinning. Say it to yourself calmly. I may never understand why, and I release the need to. Feel the space that opens up. It doesn't mean you approve. It doesn't mean you forget. It just means you stop pouring your current energy into solving an old mystery that belongs to someone else. You take your curiosity back for your own life, for the things you can actually understand and change. You let the irrational act stay irrational, and you turn your focus toward building a rational, principled response from your own character. That's where your story actually goes forward. Betrayal has a way of making other people's integrity stand out. It's like a mirror. It shows you who walked away, but it also shows you who stayed. Who leaned in, who listened, who was just there, steady, when everything else felt unstable. That's a real shift. You stop looking only at the empty space. You turn and look at the spaces that are still full, and you see them differently. The Stoics saw friendship as a sacred bond. Seneca wrote about this. He said true friendship is a partnership of shared values where you want good for the other person for their own sake. He said adversity is the test. Prosperity brings friends, but adversity sorts them out. The person who shows up when things are shaky, who supports without being asked, who acts with integrity when it would be easier not to, that person has passed. Their loyalty is an action, a choice, and betrayal, as painful as it is, gives you the clearest evidence of that choice. It separates the fair weather friends from the real ones. Your job is to see that evidence, to acknowledge it, to let it change your accounting from a list of losses to a list of discovered wealth. Think of a practical case. A painful professional betrayal. A colleague takes credit for your work and the office gets tense. In the middle of that hurt, you might notice something. Another colleague, maybe not even a close friend, pulls you aside. They offer a quiet word of encouragement. they validate your contribution in a meeting. They stay out of the gossip. Their simple, principled conduct becomes a pillar in the chaos. Before the crisis, you might have taken that decency for granted. Now you see it for what it is. That's the spotlight. It shows you who operates from virtue, regardless of the drama. So here's a practice from this. Make an effort to express gratitude to those who provided steady support. It's not a grand gesture, it's specific. Send a simple message. Say, I appreciated your calm perspective during that difficult time. Thank you for listening, or your integrity in that situation meant a lot to me. This does two things. First, it reinforces that positive relationship. Second, and maybe more important for your own healing, it trains your brain. You're directing your focus toward the sources of good. You're building pathways that look for and appreciate loyalty instead of just scanning for threats. You're watering the flowers, not just lamenting the weeds. Take a quiet moment. Look back at your own experience of betrayal. Who is one person whose loyalty was quietly confirmed then? It might be someone who just sat with you in silence, someone who offered practical help without drama, someone whose moral compass stayed steady when others were spinning. In your mind, offer them a genuine thank you. Feel the shift when you move your attention from the one who failed the test to those who passed it with quiet dignity. That's how you use the mirror, not to curse what was lost, but to clearly see and cherish what was always there, holding strong. Don't just think about it. Do the next thing, then the next. Betrayal can leave you frozen, replaying the hurt. Stoicism has an answer for that. It's movement, action. It's a philosophy of doing, not just thinking. That paralysis gets broken by a small, virtuous step, not a grand resolution, a single step. Your sense of agency, that feeling of control, gets rebuilt brick by brick. And you start with one brick, the one right in front of you. Epictetus was direct. He said, if you want to be a philosopher, don't just talk about it. Begin now. Don't wait for the perfect moment, for the pain to fade, for an apology that might never come. The path to living well is paved with the duties of the present moment. And your duty after the hurt is to your own forward motion, not a sprint, a deliberate step. That action, however small, is a declaration to your own mind. It says, I am still here, I am still capable, the story isn't over. So what is that step? It has to be simple, wholly within your control. It has nothing to do with the person who hurt you. Its virtue is in the doing itself, in reclaiming your own competence. Let's outline a sequence, a chain of small actions. First, hydrate. Drink a full glass of water. That's a basic act of self-care, a signal to your body that you're tending to it. Second, tidy one shelf, just one, a drawer, a countertop. Creating order in a small, tangible corner counters the internal chaos. It proves you can impose calm. Third, write one sentence in a journal, not a page, one honest sentence. Today was hard, or I felt angry at 10 a.m. That externalizes the swirling thought, gives it a place to live outside your mind. Each of these is a victory. They're not about fixing the past, they're about inhabiting the present. They rebuild the neural pathways of agency. They show your brain you're not powerless. You are a person who acts. When you complete that first step, the next one becomes clearer. And the next, the focus shifts. It moves from the immensity of the problem, the broken trust, the fractured relationship, to the manageable reality of the next 5 minutes. This is how you walk out of the storm, not by waiting for the skies to clear, by putting one foot in front of the other. Your task is this. Within the next hour, identify one next right step, commit to it. Make it specific, kind, and immediate. It could be stepping outside for 3 deep breaths. It could be putting your phone in another room for 20 minutes. It could be sending a kind text to someone who's been a steady presence. The content matters less than the conscious choice to move. That choice, that small action, is the first line you write in your next chapter. It's the proof that you are still the author. What if you could be so complete in yourself that a betrayal doesn't take away who you are? That's the Stoic idea of autarky, self-sufficiency. It's not about being isolated or not caring. It's about how you build your inner world. You build it so solidly that when an external support is removed, like someone's loyalty, the whole structure doesn't shudder and fall. It stays standing because the main supports are inside. Betrayal then becomes a subtraction of something you valued, not a collapse of your identity. Your worth, your stability, these aren't held in someone else's hands. They're inside your own inner citadel. Epictetus put it clearly. He taught that every real good is found within our own faculty of choice, our paralysis. Our virtue, our character, our judgments, these are the only things that are truly ours and can't be taken by any outside force. If you anchor your sense of self there, in that unassailable inner territory, then the comings and goings of external things, including people's fidelity, become like weather outside the walls. You notice the storm, but you are not the storm. You're safe inside. This is the philosophy of enough, the realization that you are already complete. Relationships then become beautiful expansions of an already rich life, not attempts to fill a void. Losing one, even through betrayal, is a painful contraction, but it's not an existential crisis. You haven't lost your foundation because your foundation was never them. It was always you. To cultivate this takes practice. It starts with solo reflection. Spending intentional time alone, not as an escape, but as a deliberate engagement with your own mind. Enjoying your own company. Listening to your own thoughts without the constant noise of external input or validation. Learning to get deep satisfaction from acting with integrity, just because it aligns with your principles, not because anyone will see it or praise you. Think of someone who's built a life around a creative pursuit: writing, painting, gardening. Their main satisfaction comes from the act of creation itself, from the dialogue between their vision and their effort. The appreciation of others is a welcome bonus, a shared joy. But if criticism or indifference comes, it doesn't destroy the core pleasure of the work. Their sense of purpose is internal. Their creative identity is intact. They're practicing autarky. Their art is their inner citadel, or consider a simpler daily practice. Choosing to take a walk without your phone, just to be with your own observations. Cooking a meal for the pleasure of the process, not just the result. Completing a task well for the private satisfaction of a job done, not for the external acknowledgement. Each of these small acts reinforces the muscle of internal self-sufficiency. They whisper to you, you are enough, your peace is generated here within. So here's a quiet space for your own reflection, a prompt to turn inward. What are 3 sources of strength, joy, or identity that reside entirely within you and cannot be taken away? They might be intangible: your capacity for curiosity, your sense of humor, your resilience from past hardships, your ability to appreciate beauty, your commitment to learning. Your personal code of ethics, name them, write them down, feel the solidity of them. These are the pillars of your citadel. When you know what they are, and you consciously dwell within them, you carry your home with you. No betrayal, however painful, can ever make you homeless. 5 years from now, you'll tell the story of this moment, and the climax, it's either going to be the raw details of your pain or the quiet demonstration of your poise. That future memory, it works like a compass. It points toward the actions you can take today. The Stoics, they were focused on living in agreement with nature. For a rational being, that means living with reason and virtue across your whole life. They believed in a consistent character, one that doesn't fracture under pressure. It holds its line from one moment to the next, from today into all your tomorrows. Your future self is watching this present moment, waiting to inherit the story you're writing right now. Will it be a story of reaction or one of principled response? This is about building a legacy of character, not cementing a narrative of victimhood. Every choice you make after a betrayal, it's a brick in that legacy. You're the author. You decide if the next chapter is called the Great Retaliation or the Dignified Rebuilding. Think about the common impulse after a deep hurt, the furious email, the public post, the scorched earth phone call. It feels justified. It feels like reclaiming power right in that moment. But then you fast forward, see yourself 5 years from now recalling that event. If you sent that email, what's the memory? It's likely a cringe, a recollection of heat and haste. You might remember the temporary surge, but then you remember the aftermath, the damaged reputations, the bridge burned beyond any repair, the lingering shame of having lost your own dignity in the fight. Now imagine the alternative. You feel the same surge. Your fingers hover over the keyboard, but you pause. You close the laptop. You choose to process the fury privately. Through a walk, through writing in a journal you never send, you decide your response, if there is one, will be measured, clear, rooted in your values, not their provocation. 5 years from now, that memory is different. It's a memory of strength, of a hard-won composure. You'll recall the difficulty of that choice, and you'll feel a deep, quiet pride in the person you are capable of being in your weakest moment. That pride becomes part of your foundation. It's evidence you can trust yourself under fire. The legacy of your response isn't for the other person, it's for you. It's the story you'll have to live with inside your own mind for the rest of your life. A Stoic chooses the action that aligns with a virtuous character. Because that character is the only true possession you have across time. So here's a practical exercise, a way to make this future lens tangible. Take a piece of paper, or open a note on your phone. Write a brief paragraph from the perspective of your future self 5 years from now. Have that wiser, calmer version of you look back at this present moment. Write a thank you note from them to you. Thank your present self for handling this situation with a specific virtue. It might read, "Thank you for choosing silence when you wanted to scream. That choice gave me the gift of peace and allowed me to move on without bitterness." Or, "Thank you for having the courage to have that honest, calm conversation. It was hard, but it gave me clarity and allowed me to close that chapter with my integrity intact." The simple act of writing this, it shifts your perspective. It makes the legacy immediate. It turns a philosophical idea into a personal contract with the person you are becoming. What story do you want that person to tell? Stoicism isn't a shield against pain. It's more like a compass for moving through it. The point of these principles isn't to build a wall so nothing gets in. It's about building something inside you that's resilient. So when a storm hits like a betrayal, you don't get swept away. You learn to stand in the rain. You learn what you're made of. It's this shift from feeling like a victim to becoming an architect. You stop asking why this happened to you. You start asking what you can build from it. It's a focus on the only thing you really own: your judgments, your actions, your character. You see the obstacle not as a stop, but as the path itself. And you pursue a justice that starts and ends with your own conduct, so you don't end up mirroring the disloyalty you faced. Seneca wrote about this. He said, "Life is long if you know how to use it, but we aren't given a short life, we make it short. We aren't poor in time, we're wasteful with it. To spend your days rehearsing a grievance, to let someone else's failing dictate your inner weather for months or years, that's the real waste." The Stoic invitation is to take that time back, to invest it in your own growth, in your peace, in the connections that are still true. So here's a thought. Look back on the principles: the audit of control, the pause before judgment, Amor, Fati, the view from above, just action. Pick one, just one to practice this week. When a small frustration comes up, practice the pause. When an old hurt surfaces, try the view from above. Make it a quiet experiment. I'd be curious to know which idea resonated. Which tool feels most needed for you right now?